All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So this is kind of a follow-up to a podcast that I did previously. It was called "Does School Make Us Lazy Pieces of Shit?" And that podcast I did was really about my past and me, what I went through going to school. Obviously, all the way up until high school and graduating, how I felt a lot of times we're being programmed to become lazy to a certain point. You have to, all of a sudden at 5 years old, hypothetically, or whatever age you started, 4, 5, or 6, and you are thrown into an environment where now you have to sit for 6, 7 hours at a time for the most part, minus recess, maybe lunch. But it's really all about sitting now when you're younger and you have all this energy. And and that goes all the way up until high school, and how I felt like a prisoner in that situation. And there's a lot of people that have no problem, obviously, sitting. But I do think it's not only just the sitting, I should say. It's now you have to go home and do homework and study on top of that. And on top of that, then you have to sit usually to have dinner with your parents or just have dinner in general. Before you know it, most of your day is sitting on your ass. It's not very active. And I really think that's part of why we have obesity. It's not just because of video games and when kids come home they're lazy. It's because for a majority of the day they're sitting on their ass. But this podcast is going to be different. And I think a lot of times when I say things, I offend people. But I could care less, to be honest with you. But this one is called "What Did Teachers Actually Teach Me?" And this, again, is not a dig on teachers. I think a lot of teachers are amazing. What they do, it's incredible. I know a lot of them don't make, a lot of money, and I know a lot of them go through a lot of pressure, and it's an amazing job, very fulfilling, I'm sure. And a lot of people get a lot out of teachers, right? And I had some cool teachers, but I'm not going to lie, and I may be one of not many, I don't know. But I think, for the most part, a lot of us do learn things in school. There's no question about it. We probably forget way more than we learn. I believe. I don't care who you are. But the main thing I want to say is, after analyzing certain things over my life and looking at the thousands of hours of sitting in classrooms that we do growing up, what are we really coming home? What information is really, what are we carrying with us that's really benefiting us? And I get we all learn how to, read and write in school. We all learn, how to add. We learn history, but the truth is, how much history do you really remember? You more or less remember your own history. And again, this isn't for honor students or really, and I get there's kids that comprehend everything. Some people go to classrooms, they don't, like my buddy who's got a PhD. He claims he has no creativity skills, but he does. But his thing is, when he reads, he falls asleep. But if he goes to a classroom and a teacher talks, he comprehends everything. And that worked great for him. But if you're not one of those people, where do you stand? And that's not a bad thing either. I'm not saying, I just had comprehension issues. And because I don't think I respected teachers. And here's the big one, I think a lot of times, is a lot of courses they're teaching, I really believe, aren't that beneficial. I think there's tons of fillers and so much bullshit mixed in there. It's ridiculous, because I firmly believe there could be so many other things they could be teaching our children, and they could have taught me, even from financing, right? You take an accounting course, even in high school, they don't really teach you anything about like interest rates, really financing a home, buying a car, things that you're actually going to be doing, right? Investing in real estate in the future, tax benefits. I'm just using some of these for an example. Even, it could be anything. It could be whatever, how should I say this? Skills that we need. And it could be even, I know this sounds crazy. Like I went to a college prep class, and nobody in my class in high school, I remember our car broke down once. There was like 4 guys, maybe more. Nobody knew how to change a tire. I did, out of a fluke. I think because my father may have showed me. Nobody knew anything like this. No one knew how to change oil. And I'm still kind of like that. No one knew how to really do anything with our hands. And I think as a grade school, unless your parents were in a union or they did construction or something, like we should be taught things with which if we buy a house, like we should be learning certain things about upkeep of a home, right? I'm not saying we have to learn about plumbing and electrical. I'm just saying general things. And that can be a car, like I just said. I didn't, like how do you jump a car? How do you change a battery? And this goes back in the older days when, we didn't have all these things. But not only that, marriage, license, like what are you learning about how relationships, like are you really learning about that in high school? Maybe it's not their place to a certain degree, but they definitely should teach you about contracts, right? Because you're going to be signing contracts in your life. Are you really learning the legalities of those, especially like in a marriage situation, prenups, hypothetically, contracts you're signing for anything? I don't see them teaching anything like that. And again, I'm not here to dig on the school systems or teachers, but it kind of amazes me that a lot of things that my kids, I wish they were learning, they have to depend on us, which I understand. We're parents. We should be teaching them that. There's no question about that. But a lot of parents don't understand it either, especially as time goes on. Even taxes. You could probably teach our kids really how to do their own taxes, I would think. Considering if you look at a ACT or an SAT type of test, that's probably a lot more complicated. Why aren't they teaching our kids how to do their own taxes, right? And I understand there's all these other companies that'll lose money, but the truth is, either they're making taxes too complicated to do, or and it shouldn't be that hard, or our kids should be able to learn how to do their taxes where they don't have to pay anybody and parents don't have to pay anybody. We should also be learning how to do that. But nonetheless, I'm just saying, these are the type of things I believe that are always being overlooked, right? And here's something that I always talk about regarding kids, which amazes me because I've been through this. So I think especially younger people, they play a lot of video games or they see a lot of movies that are very violent. They don't understand when things go bad, they don't fear it. So they don't fear doing something wrong a lot of times because they don't realize how bad it really is. And when I grew up, it wasn't about I grew up around a lot of Italians. So it wasn't, going to prison didn't scare me. What would happen to you when you were in the prison is what would scare me, right? But I don't think kids have that fear anymore. I just don't think they have a lot of fear in general when it comes to that because they've never really been around that. But I always said if you took high school students, for instance, even maybe junior high, and you just went to a prison and took a tour, stuck them in a prison cell literally for an hour, maybe less, I don't care. Shut that door, walk out. They don't get a computer, they don't get a phone, they get nothing but a bed like you really are in prison. You would be shocked, I think, that this would really change people's perspective on what life really is like inside a prison. Because I think a lot of people see movies and they see them breaking out or all this shit, or they see reality like documentaries, but they're like, well, that's not that bad, or that kind of looks cool, or whatever you think it is. But when you lose your freedom, you lose everything. And I don't think a lot of kids growing up that ends up in a life of crime realize that. Even selling drugs or whatever they're doing. Even getting a DUI, hypothetically. If you're teaching kids in high school, it's easy to say, hey, don't drink and drive. Don't text and drive. No. Go show them what happens to you when you have to go through the process of DUI. Again, you're going to end up in jail. Again, it's going to cost you $12,000 or $15,000. Teach your kids these things. If they get caught, whatever they're doing, teach them the laws. What really are what's going to happen to them? A lot of kids don't even realize what's going to happen to them, and they end up getting in a lot more trouble, or they end up doing something very foolish, because I think a lot of kids growing up do things that are stupid. It could be drinking and driving. It could be even doing drugs. And I get there's these classes where I think it's just phony. I think we really need to start grasping the reality of there's a lot of, drugs out there. A lot of people are overdosing, and we kind of pretend it doesn't exist. And then our kids, which I've been doing podcasts on this, you have to teach your children the streets. Because I assure you, the school system is not going to. And again, it may not be their job to. Probably isn't. It's probably your job. But I also think the school systems can step in a little and really teach them certain things that happen, again, to certain people. When you break the law, this happens. When you do this most likely is going to happen. You're going to go to court. This is going to happen, right? Even if back to real estate. If you want to buy a house, let's figure this out. This is how much money you're going to need down. This is what you're going to, you're going to have a certain credit score. You're going to have to maintain the home. If you can't afford to pay it, you're going to go into foreclosure. This is what's going to happen to your credit. You may have to file bankruptcy. A lot of these things I don't think are taught in school. And if they are, they weren't when I was. And I don't hear my daughters talking about that or younger people that I know. My girlfriend has 2 kids at home too. But I think everyone's afraid to install fear in children. And I don't mean fear in where you want to scare them or they don't buy a home or anything. But they don't want to say, it's all kind of like, oh yeah, when you get married, you're going to get the house with the white picket fence, and everything's going to go your way, and you're going to go to college, and then you're going to be, you're going to get a great job after college, and this is going to happen. You're going to find the love of your life, and then all these things. No, a lot of them aren't going to get any of those things, and a lot of them are going to be in debt a lot of money because of college. A lot of them are going to lose their homes. A lot of them are going to lose their jobs. A lot of them are going to end up in divorce. And again, I'm not saying you certain things you can teach and certain things you can't. Obviously, you can't teach someone what it is to go through a divorce. But what you can teach them is if they do go through a divorce, what should they do? How should they handle those situations, right? And I don't mean from an emotional side of things. That's personal. What I'm saying is if someone's, you teach a class on marriage, like truly when you sign a contract, should you do a prenup? How do you protect yourself? When you have kids, child support, what are you legally supposed to pay? All these type of things I don't see are ever being addressed. And I think one of the reasons is obviously because the state or lawyers or all these people make tons of money off people's ignorance. So, you may be thinking, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I really do believe what I'm saying regarding this because a lot of times too, I came from a divorced household and I didn't have my father around. And I had these discussions with my mother all the time. She's like, well, your dad could fix anything. He can do electrical, he does construction, he builds engines, he makes motorcycles, he does this, he does that. And I get it. I didn't do any of those things. But I think he went to a military school, but he also took a liking to those things, and he liked doing those things. I told her, nothing against her, anybody. I grew up at 5 years old outside, the outskirts of Chicago. Basically, I was bouncing between an apartment complex and then a 3-flat in Cicero. And I was with an immigrant grandfather who was much older. And that was basically my father figure besides my father. And I also had a lot of uncles, too. Don't get me wrong. Tons of uncles and aunts. But the ones I was around a lot of times, they liked gambling, they liked going to the track, we'd go to Highlight, or we liked to go boating, or we liked to, go to Chicago Bears games. I would live in an apartment. I don't think I cut a lawn till I went and visited my father at like 18 years old. I almost had my fingers cut off because I almost reached at the lawnmower underneath to like lift it up. That's how naive I really was. Or maybe, no, I take that back. I think in high school, I helped cut my stepfather's lawn. To make a long story, I never knew how to cut lawn. I never had to do anything in an apartment or learn, because if something broke down, we called them. My stepfather was in construction, so I went a couple days with him. I was so lost, I didn't even know where to begin. I felt like I was in Mars. And I knew right then and there, I'm not saying I like physical labor as long as it's kind of clean. I am not a guy who's going to be banging nails, laying bricks, doing cement, cutting saws or any of that shit. I don't feel comfortable doing it. But back to school again, I don't always throw myself in the mix, but that's just something that I was programmed, or I just never was around those type of things. Where my father grew up in a household, a very wealthy household, where they had all different types of cars, motorcycles, and boats, and all these different types of things. So he learned to work on them, and he took an interest in them. I just basically would go on a boat to water ski, or barefoot or whatever, slalom, do shit like that, swim. I wanted to go to a gym. I didn't want to go hang in a garage. All right, I wanted to go play. He played sports, but I wanted to go play sports. I didn't want to sit around, and I was definitely not a gearhead. But back to school again with our kids. If, another thing that I keep emphasizing on my podcast, if you're a parent, please teach your kids self-defense. I said this on the other podcast as well. My buddy was just talking about this. He owns a boxing gym, and he is shocked how many parents and kids do not know how to protect themselves, let alone even throw a punch, right? He's amazed because we all grew up, and we grew up in an environment where you had to kind of fight for what you wanted. And even learning how to fight physically, that doesn't mean you're killing each other. Knowing how to stand up for yourself, not allowing people to bully you. And sometimes you may get punched in the face. You may have to punch someone. You have to protect yourself because, especially with your kids, no one's going to protect them. Again, why do, say, school? School should be teaching self-defense, especially to women. Really? I mean, truthfully, why is it that in the school program? That is one of the most bonkers things I've ever seen. That, and you can't expect PE to do that. Like, you may play dodgeball, who the hell knows, but you're going to play basketball, maybe in PE, or maybe flag football, whatever you're playing in there, softball, whatever the case may be. They should be learning how to protect themselves. That doesn't mean they're fighting each other. They should be learning that aspect of it. Women definitely should be learning how to do that. Also, women, I really believe, and men have to learn not to always worry about somebody else's feelings in certain situations. A lot of women find themselves, and I have 2 daughters. My mother, or still my grandmother, my girlfriend, she's got a daughter. I do have fear inside me sometimes because I don't trust men out there, because a lot of men are hunters. But a lot of men either convince women or physically take advantage of them, especially they may get them drunk. They may slip them something in their drinks. Whatever the case may be, again, there should be classes and there should be things being taught how to protect yourself on many different levels. Not only physically, even mentally. As our teens get older, they've got to realize there's a lot of bad people out there. And one of the things is they really better start learning is really not to trust anyone. And I know that's very harsh, but it is the truth. My mother says that all the time, so does my father. Maybe it's because we were in the nightclub business or whatever, but a lot of times the ones that end up fucking you over are the ones that are closest to you, right? That's you, because the ones that are distant or the ones you don't know, you're never going to give them a chance. It's the ones you don't expect that are the ones coming at you. And that's just something that needs to be taught. And how you teach that, I believe, is by being honest. You have to have certain classes, and I remember even learning about pregnancy and in my class or sex ed. It was so bullshitty. I wanted to fucking throw up. Now, I don't know how they are anymore, but it was like they'd show you a picture of a penis and a vagina, and then if these two, have intercourse, the sperm does that. You think, who gives a shit? Get to the real deal here. What type of ways can a woman really protect herself? What type of birth control? How should a man really protect himself? How should a man protect himself from not being charged with rape? This is no joke. Nobody really thinks about teaching these things, but you have to educate your kids on all these different levels. And again, parents a lot of times, I think, too, fall into a category of being afraid to being honest with their kids. Or, and I get this too, when you tell your kids something, they're going to be like, shut up, I don't want to talk about sex with you. Yeah, I know, whatever. They get embarrassed, right? So that's a hard kind of place to be. But as far as schools go, again, I'm not telling you to teach them how to have sex. I'm telling you to start teaching them, school systems, how to protect themselves on many different levels. Because those are the things that is really going to stick with them for the rest of their life. Not necessarily a lot of filler bullshit that you're learning. And I'm not saying that doesn't stimulate your brain and it doesn't, like learning languages, amazing. Learning instruments, amazing. Even physical fitness, amazing. History, great. But there's definitely a lot of room in there for things to be taught that our kids need to learn at a much higher level and not make all the mistakes that I think a lot of younger people keep making over and over and over again, especially when it comes to early pregnancies, even abortion, hypothetically. I mean, even a lot of politics and stuff. Now, I am not into politics, is what I should say. So that's one thing I should actually not even say. But how it's not about teaching them politics, what the teacher believes is right or wrong. That's what but teaching them to be open-minded and figuring it out for themselves, not what necessarily always what their parents believe or what the teacher believes, really feeling or having the freedom and not being pressured a lot of times in believing certain things. And I think that's another component that could be taught is a lot of us are being pressured, I think, in high school especially, to say, hey, if you don't go to college, you're an idiot. Hey, if you don't do this, you're an idiot. If you don't end up like this, you're stupid. If you all these type of pressures, which is bullshit. I think we need to help our students find their way to where they want to go afterwards. And a lot of it may not be college. I don't know what it is. But what I'm saying is, if we can help them just, because I think the programming, at least what I found out is, I get it. When we're younger, we're being programmed. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade. All right, now we're in junior high. We're still kind of being, when you hit high school, from what I see, a lot of kids are just fucking burnt out. They're burnt out on their parents, right? Always telling them what's right and wrong. They're burnt out on a lot of their, high school. A lot of times, like going to school every day, same old routine that you've been doing the last, 8 to 12 years. It's exhausting, man. Like, what's fresh about that? What's new? We have to sometimes take different approaches than we're taking. And that doesn't mean just let them run wild, but there's got to be some balance in there, and we have to get hip because I firmly believe we are not hip. We think we're kind of hip, but as far as what I'm seeing now, again, I'm not back in high school. So I can't sit here and say what it is to truly go to high school at this day and age. I'm just going by what I saw my daughters go through and my girlfriend's kids still kind of going through in high school. And they're really intelligent kids. But I do think, and you could just see it, especially by junior and senior year, it's kind of like, all right, we're getting ready for college. And it, like the last 2 years, I'm not saying they're fluff years because they have exams, obviously, and they have SAT score. They're prepping, but it's kind of all built around taking this test or getting prepared for college, which is wonderful. But in between there, are they really prepared for college? Like, I get getting into college, but did high school prepare them on what college is really about, even from like what may happen in a fraternity or a sorority, good and bad? What's going to happen when you get in debt? And how will you help them get them out of debt? Or how do you help your parents maybe deal with that financial situation, right? Are you really preparing? You're preparing them to get into something, I believe, which is getting in there. So obviously this university makes a lot of money off these kids or their parents. Okay, but are like back to protecting themselves from bad things happening, because as you know, at a lot of universities, tons of things happen that are horrific, but they usually get hidden, or the kids don't want to talk about it, or who the hell knows what's happening. They should be also preparing you for that. That's another thing. And if they go on to a different workplace, they don't go to college with high school, instead of really always kind of, it reminds me of like high school. I went to a college prep school again. They are always like, you got to dress this way to get a job. You got to act this way, and you got to do this. That's not the truth at all. Depending on what type of job or what type of career you want, give them the correct information. It's not all just one way, right? And I'm not saying that, I'm kind of saying a lot that high schools are responsible for, and I don't mean it in that sense. But I do think there's a lot of things high school, or parents, I should say, both can help prepare their children to really become what they really want to become, and take an honest approach at that. But definitely educating them, I really believe, especially high school, back to mortgages and all these different types of things, and learning about financing from a realistic point of view. Like, a lot of people get credit cards, they don't realize interest rates. When they get a high interest rate, or literally when they go get a car, they're not even paying attention. They think, oh, the payment's only this. They don't realize they're paying they're getting burned. They don't realize, a lot of kids, when they buy a car, how much it's devaluing. They don't even realize a lot of times when they're getting into a car how much it is to even fix a car, right? All these type of things should be taught. That's all I'm saying. So, I'm going to wrap it up there. And hopefully I'm not attacking teachers. I'm not attacking the school systems. I'm just saying that I think it's time to explore other things and open our minds to teaching our kids. And I don't think necessarily always sitting in a classroom for 6-7 hours at a time, is always the best way to go. I really don't. I think we need more things that are energizing and making us healthier physically, mentally, stimulating us. When I was in California, I heard you could even take when I was living in San Diego, Carlsbad, actually, northern San Diego, and they had a surfing class, and I was like, that's amazing. And during school, I'm like, that's, you would think that's no, that's unbelievable. And I'm not even an outdoors guy, but if you think about that from the standpoint of, it's really hard to surf, right? Physically, to really go out there, and I've surfed in Florida, in California. California waves are bigger. Hopefully, there's no sharks, but I mean, put that aside. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of balance, and you get some sun, some vitamin D, fresh air, and it just it's just an amazing thing, I think. And you could, I think they also have biking. They have certain things that I realized in San Diego that were so much more physically, more physically, I don't know, just more things to do physically within their program, which I thought was great besides just the standard like soccer, basketball, football, whatever the case may be, but things kind of more within nature. And I thought that was great. And I think it's hard, too, because I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago, and I think what happens with that is everything's indoors. So everybody has to stay indoors. And besides your gym, but everybody's kind of just, for the most part, sitting around a lot more often, right? Because, again, it's indoors, where if you take places like Florida, California, hypothetically, and a lot of other areas, there's tons of great places, you could go outside and do things. But I don't think the schools, in the winter months, everything's going to be kind of like indoor, or it's actually for like 6 months, which again, I understand that, but we really got to teach our kids to get off their asses, because as they get older, and that's one more thing in school they should be teaching, is fitness, how to take care of themselves, learning how to eat properly, or at least better than they're eating now. Learn really what nutrition's about, learning all different types of exercises, not just the standard ones. Because as they're getting older, especially, time just catches up with you. When they're 30, what to expect even physically. 40, what to expect physically again. What you're going to go through. How to prevent heart disease, maybe. All these different types of things. I don't think they necessarily, and it's just very basic things. I'm not saying you have to get into the whole scientific aspect of it, but really just prepare our kids for the future from a physical standpoint. All right, I'm going to end it there. If you get a chance, you can check out my YouTube channel, Rich CELENZA. That's Rich, CELENZA. Let me get some water here. I've been posting a lot of different things regarding fitness lately, including gyms that I've been traveling to all over North America, giving you an idea of what these gyms look like, just in case you want to work out at them. And I have a Mastering Self-Confidence program out. I help men try to find the woman or women of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. And I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So if you want, leave a comment. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Maybe some will agree with me. Any feedback's great. If you want to connect with me, I love helping people. And I'm just going to wrap it up there. Thanks for listening. And if you're traveling, safe travels.